Tomatoes are one of the easiest and most productive crops which you can grow. However, this productivity can be somewhat hindered if the plants are simply just left to their own devices. Correct pruning and care throughout the growing season is required so we can really push our tomato plants to the absolute max and get the most out of them, which will allow us to reap the rewards further down the line in the form of an abundance of juicy, delicious, sweet tomatoes. In this video, I'll be going over all the basics of pruning tomatoes which every gardener and lover of this brilliant fruit should know, and just how to do it. So without further ado, let's get right into Tomato Pruning 101. Now, the tips in this video are going to help you achieve the best possible crop of tomatoes. So do make sure you stick around to the end of this video. And if you do stick around to the end of this video, there's also a little bit of a bonus as well which I've stuck in there. Why prune tomato plants? And how do you prune tomato plants? Now we have our lovely tomato here which we're going to be doing some basic pruning on. And this one has been left to get a little bit big now. These side shoots, these suckers here have started to get a little bit big now. They can soon grow actually to become quite long. And I'm going to actually prune these off. These appear between the leaf and the stem of the tomato plant, because a tomato plant naturally tries to bush out. That is just how they grow, and they do this by sending out these side shoots here in the armpit, as some gardeners call them. And we're going to go along and cut these off. Now these side shoots do not have to be destined for the compost heap. We can use them in the garden, and I'm going to show you what you can do with these a little bit later in the video. So I'm going along and I'm cutting off all these side shoots. And what this is going to do is, this is going to focus the plant's energy on growing vertically rather than bushy. And it's going to be growing through this one growing tip at the top of the plant. And what this is going to do is, it's going to produce a much tidier plant, and it's going to allow you to space them a good distance apart from each other, 20 inches or so, and they're going to have much better space between them, much more space. They're not going to be crowded. There's going to be better aeration and ventilation around your plants, and you're going to have less of a risk of disease as well. And they're going to be competing for light less as well. They're not going to be crowding each other, so they'll be able to get adequate amounts of light. Now, towards the top of the plant, the growing tip, when a new set of buds appears here, you do have to watch out for these side shoots appearing, because they can come very fast. Now sometimes you may miss a side shoot and the plant may start to grow into a V shape, and you can let them grow two different ways, but I wouldn't do them any more than that, to be honest. Sometimes I will, like you see here, that plant is now going to try and grow two ways at the top like a V shape. I am going to cut that side shoot off though, and I want it to grow in one single way like that. Now you also have to just watch out, because these tomatoes are going to try sending side shoots out from the very bottom of the stem there where the soil line is, and these can catch you out as well, so it is important to keep an eye on those. Make sure they don't catch you out. Now it doesn't end there either, because side shoots can even start appearing at the very ends of the trusses of tomatoes. See this bunch of tomato flowers here? Well, on the very ends of them, there is a new growing point. Now I like to also cut those off, because it is going to try and grow from those as well. This only applies to indeterminate varieties of tomato, because indeterminate varieties of tomato grow throughout the growing season up until the last frost. They'll just keep on going. Whereas determinate varieties of tomato produce a crop more or less at the exact same time all at once. And these only grow to a set height of around about 3 feet. They don't require support and they don't require pruning of the side shoots, because these side shoots will bear our fruit. So if you cut the side shoots off, you're not really going to get any fruits. So yes, only prune indeterminate varieties of tomato. Now, as our tomato plants grow, they can become very bushy and sort of get like a jungle. So we're going to cut off a few of these excess leaves as good working practice to reduce our risk of disease like blight. When the tomato plants get to this sort of height, you know, they're probably around about 3 feet tall now, and there's a couple of bunches of tomatoes starting to form on there now. But these lower leaves here are starting to go a little bit, well, they're worse on some of the plants. You know, they are starting to go a little bit yellow. So I'm going to cut these lower leaves off up to around about 1 foot of height. Now these leaves aren't really much use to the plant anymore, to be honest. A lot of the photosynthesis happens in the newer leaves towards the top of the plant. So I'm going to cut off all these. This might seem dramatic, but trust me, it's not going to harm the plant at all. In fact, it's just going to, you know, it's just going to be beneficial for it, to be honest. By cutting off the lower leaves of our tomato plants, we're going to greatly reduce the risk of diseases such as late tomato blight, which is the disease which we're most bothered about really, because ventilation is going to be much better around our tomato plants, and blight spores are going to be unable to settle on the stems and leaves due to better air circulation. Plus, you don't really want old rotten leaves lying around either. And not only this, but our tomatoes are going to be more exposed to the sunlight as well. They're not going to be covered in foliage. So this is going to help us with our tomato ripening as well. And there is also another thing about pruning which I'd like to touch on as well, and that is limiting the amount of trusses which grow on our tomato plants. Now, if you live in a temperate climate like we do in the UK, where we have a growing season where we're limited, you know, if we're growing tomatoes, we've got only a few months of the year. We like to limit our tomato plants to 5 trusses of tomatoes. So once these tomatoes have 5 trusses on them of growing fruit, I will trim off the top, the growing point of the tomato plant to stop it from growing anymore. So the plant is then at a set height, 5 trusses of fruit. And I do this so that the plant can focus its energy on ripening the fruits that it already has. There's no point leaving your plant to produce more fruits when these probably aren't even going to ripen anyway before the end of the growing season. With cherry tomatoes in September, you could probably get away with leaving them on there, but any later than that and I will discard of them. And with beefsteak tomatoes, I like to make sure that there's none on there from September really, because they do take a long time to ripen. Cherry tomatoes are much quicker. It is possible to ripen tomatoes, green ones, at home off the vine late in the growing season, but personally I do prefer vine ripened tomatoes. And of course, another problem which you can end up with when you're trying to ripen green tomatoes off the vine at home is you can end up with them rotting as well. I've had this last year where half the tomatoes I was trying to ripen at home actually ended up rotting. And if you have a problem with tomato blight, you can end up just completely contaminating your entire crop of green tomatoes. All it takes is a tiny little bit of blight infection on one of them tomatoes and it can just spread through the entire lot. So this is what I like to do. You know, some other people may do it a little bit differently, and some may not limit their plants to any trusses of fruit at all, and some may not take the growing tip out, and that's fine, but this is what I do, and this yields the best results in my opinion. Another thing I'd like to mention about pruning as well, in regards to flowers, I like to prune off the first flowers which appear on my tomato plants 2 weeks after I transplant them into their final growing positions. Now, I do this because I want the tomato plant to become established first in its final growing position. I don't want the plant to try and produce fruit when that root system hasn't even established yet. By removing any buds and flowers that appear within the first 2 weeks of transplanting our tomato plant, I am going to end up with a much stronger plant which will benefit us further down the line. Now, I said before that you can actually save these side shoots and grow them into an entirely new cloned tomato plant. And this is really good if you want a few more tomato plants and you're a little bit too late in the season to sow more tomato seeds. Like from June, for example. You're not going to think about sowing tomato seeds in June, it's far too late. But if you were to save these side shoots and grow them into a new plant in June, it is possible to get a later crop after your main tomatoes have finished fruiting. So you can get 2 crops of tomatoes in the same season, or even more. And this is all possible because tomatoes will send out roots from whichever part of the stem touches the soil or any moisture as well. If it touches water, it will also send out roots. And every single one of these little hairs which you see on the tomato stem will transform into a root. And tomatoes root very easily from cuttings. In fact, I have one here which I took a cutting from only a few weeks ago actually, and it's coming along quite nicely. I couldn't tell you what variety it is because it was just a random cutting I took from a plant, but I think it's a variety that I like, but I just can't remember. But yeah, this is my other tomato cutting, and I've taken a few more actually. There's one here which I took a few days ago, which is going nicely. And yeah, so it literally is as simple as just taking a pot of compost and sticking the stem into the compost like that. That is it. Just keep it watered, and it may wilt as soon as you stick it in, you know, for the first couple of days. You may want to keep it in a cool, shaded area at first so it's not stressed with heat and direct sunlight until the roots start to form. But within a couple of weeks, you'll see roots coming out the bottom of the pot and you have a whole new tomato plant. So rather than wasting them side shoots, why not turn them into a whole new tomato plant? So that was my video on pruning tomatoes. Pretty much everything, all the basics really, that you need to know about pruning tomatoes. So I hope I managed to help you all with your gardening questions related to tomatoes and pruning them. Remember, if you like the video, hit that like button so YouTube can suggest this video to other users as well. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel so you can see when I upload new content just like this. So I hope to see you in the next one. Happy gardening and stay safe.